Polynomials, solving polynomials, and the goal is to apply your knowledge from the earlier part of the unit to talk about the factors and the roots. So in example 1, here's the graph, so you need to make sure you draw that graph on your paper because there was a blank there, so you want to make sure you draw that graph in the top left corner. That's where it was. This graph, what we know about it is it actually crosses the x-axis at 3 points. So it has 3 roots or solutions. So the roots, or what are called the solutions to this, are x equals, and it would be -3, -1, and +2. So it has 3 answers where it crosses the x-axis. Those are called the roots. We can also write those as what are called factors. So factors are taking those numbers and putting them in parentheses. When you put them in parentheses, you write the opposite, because we're going to say what makes x equal -3? Well, x plus 3 equals 0. So a factor, so -3 would be x plus 3. -1 would be x plus 1. And 2 would be x minus 2. So basically those factors are, if you set those things equal to 0, you get x equals -3. You get x equals -1. You get x equals 2 by setting those equal to 0. And then lastly, the type of graph that it is you should know by looking at it what type of graph it is. Remember, there's a linear, there's a quadratic, there's a cubic, there's a quartic. This is a cubic graph. So it crosses at 3 spots, and it would be a cubic. There's 3 different x's here, so that gives us the type of graph it is. So that's everything that we know about it. Now, one other thing that it says, in case this was not part of what you wrote, because it wasn't, use function notation to highlight values of importance. So f of 0 equals 6. So what they're saying is this is the only thing that we would say here, is that the y-intercept, so they've asked that a couple times, the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. That is at 6. Okay? So that would be the point 0.06 is where it crosses the y-axis. That's not one of our solutions. So our solutions, our answers, are where it crosses the x-axis, which is -3, -1, and +2. But if it asks you what the y-intercept is, which it may, that is 6. So that's one thing that they wanted to also say is important in looking at a polynomial. Okay, so you have 2 that you would that we want to do from each one. So there's 2 from example 1, and then 2, or 2 from example 2, sorry, and then 2 also from example 3. So if we look down at example 2, part A, it asks us to find the factors, the root, and the graph of this problem. So it is, and I'm going to move it up and erase some of my other things. Okay, and we're not looking at B because that's not there yet. We're not doing that one. So in this problem, it is x to the third plus 3x squared minus 4x and minus 12. So we look at, what we're looking at here is we look at x to the third and 3x squared, these first 2 numbers, and we say, what can we take out of x to the third and 3x squared? Meaning, what do they have in common? What do they both have? They both have at least 2 x's, x squared and x to the third. This one has 3, this one only has 2. So we can take out an x squared. That's called our GCF. And then we write what's left. what's left in there is if you take 2 of the 3 away, you have 1 left. And if you take x squared away, you just have a 3 left. So it's just x plus 3. So you got x squared and then x plus 3. That's what's left. In the other one, negative 4 minus 12, negative 4x minus 12, you can take a negative 4 out. And if you take a negative 4 out, you just have x. And then if you take a negative 4 out of negative 12, negative 12 divided by negative 4 gives you a positive 3. So that's just taking out the GCF. Okay, so you get x squared minus 4, and you get x plus 3. Those are your two things. That's a factoring thing. X squared minus 4 is the difference of squares, which is where you write one positive and one negative. The square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 4 is 2. So you write x minus 2, x plus 2. Okay, those are your factors, x minus 2, x plus 2, and x plus 3. Now there's another way of getting those factors, and an easier way of getting those factors would be to graph these. So if you were going to graph them, you could use Desmos, and I would go over to Desmos and I would say, okay, I'm going to take x to the third plus 3x squared minus 4x minus 12. And this is the graph I would get, so I would be able to make my graph. And then I would also be able to get my 3 solutions. So if you look, my solutions are negative or roots, whatever you want to call them, roots or solutions are negative 3, negative 2, and positive 2, which means my factors are the opposite of that, right, in parentheses. So if it's negative 3, my factor is x plus 3. If it crosses at negative 2, my factor is x plus 2. And if it crosses at 2, my factor is x minus 2. So there's where you get your factors and where you get your roots. Okay, so that's where you get your factors and also where you get your roots. And then you can see the graph. The graph from Desmos looked like that. Okay, so everybody should be able to see. There's your graph. If I make it big screen and I zoom out, you can see what it looks like. That's my graph. The important part is where does it cross, right? These are very important. And then those are your roots, and then you make them the opposite to make that your factors. So your factors are x plus 3, x plus 2, and x minus 2. And we'll go to the next one. Okay, in the next problem, we're doing x to the 5th minus 8x to the 3rd minus 9x. Okay, we don't need to factor all that out. We just need to be able to get the factors, the roots, and the graph. X to the 5th minus x to the 3rd minus 9x. All right, so here is the important thing. Here is for factors, you are just going to have to know, you're not going to have to know the ones that say I. You're just going to have to know where it crosses. So you're going to type in x to the 5th minus 8x to the 3rd minus 9x. So again, I'm going to go to Desmos and type that in. X to the 5th minus 8x to the 3rd minus 9x. So here's the important part. Where does it cross? It crosses at negative 3, so that's a factor of x plus 3. Because it crosses at negative 3, you have a factor of x plus 3. Because it crosses at 0, you have a factor of just x. It's just x. Because x equals 0, so it's just x. And then because it crosses at positive 3, you have a factor of x minus 3. Okay? So you have a factor of x plus 3 because it crosses at negative 3. You have a factor of x because it crosses at 0. and you have a factor of x minus 3 because it crosses at positive 3. So these are your three solutions on this graph. When you write your roots or your solutions on that page for B, you want to write -3, 0, and 3. And then we want to draw that graph where it crosses at -3, where it crosses at 0, and where it crosses at positive 3. You see how like skinny that one is, but that's what it'll look like. Okay, so I'm going to take you to the next one. We're just kind of going through. Desmos is going to help you on this, so don't make it harder than it needs to be. So on the next problem, example 3, it's going to say, it says x to the third plus 4x squared plus x minus 6. It's right here. Okay, again, you don't have to worry about doing anything here. Here is we're going to use the problem to get the factors, the roots, and the graph. So I'm going to show it to you real quick, and then I'll show you how we got those. So I took the problem in example 3. I went to Desmos, okay? I graphed it. When I graphed it on Desmos, it crossed at -3, it crossed at -2, and it crossed at +1. So those were my roots. -3, -2, and +1, because that's where it crossed the x-axis. So that means my factors were, for -3, it would be x plus 3. They had already given me that one. For -2, it was x plus 2. And for 1, it was x minus 1. So that's all you have to know. Okay, is 2. So really all you're doing here is graphing it, looking at where it crosses, knowing that those are your roots, and then writing your factors as the opposite. Okay, so again, if I went to Desmos here, which I will real quick, I just typed it in, again, x to the third plus 4x squared plus x minus 6. And I can see by clicking -3, -2, and +1. All right, and go to the last one on here. The very last question was, or there's two more, right? So the next one was x to the third minus 5x squared plus 2x plus 8. So let me go to that one. Okay, if you go to Desmos on that one, then here's what you're going to see for that next one. So this is B in example 3. X to the third minus 5x squared plus 2x plus 8. Let's just go ahead and go there and type that in. I'm going to click. I see -1, +2, and +4. So those are my roots. So my roots are -1, +2, and +4. So that means my factors are, if I have a -1, that's a factor of x plus 1. 2 is a factor of x minus 2. And 4 is a factor of x minus 4. So that's all I have to do there. And then I have my graph. So again, I always want to make sure I graph it right. And then I want to make sure that I have my three solutions. And then lastly, I want to make sure that I make those solutions into factors, which is just put them in parentheses and make it the opposite. So then in the very last one on here, it's x to the third plus 6x squared plus 11x plus 6. X to the third plus 6x squared plus 11x plus 6. Okay, that one crosses at -3, -2, and -1. So it's kind of hard to see, but again on Desmos it's easy when you can click on it to see that this is where it crosses. It crosses at -3, goes up a little bit, back down, crosses at -2, down a little bit, back up, crosses at -1, and then off it goes, right? So your roots for this last problem are -3, -2, and -1, which means that your factors are x plus 3, x plus 2, and x plus 1. And that was just the extra problem that I put on there, okay, just so you can see it. So it's not in your notes, that's just the extra one to see, just so you can go through and see what I'm talking about. If you're wanting to graph this, if you type it in Desmos, you can see where it crosses, and then you can see the y-intercept if you need to. You can also see where it crosses the y-axis if you're trying to make your graph look like the graph that's on Desmos. Okay, so that is solving polynomials. So basically, if you want to sum up this one, all you really need to do when they give you a polynomial is to go to your calculator or Desmos and graph it. Find where it crosses the x-axis, write that down as your roots, and then write down your factors as the opposite of that. And that's the 3-step process to getting these. So that's why this is at the end of the unit, but it's an easy kind of summary for how you find the answers to these. Okay. So I'm going to stop.